by the United States military today. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt and other cabinet members are currently addressing the press. Let's cut across.
On all of that. And his health team to make an important announcement with respect to the president's domestic promise to make America healthy again as we kick off the new year. In less than a year in office, the president and his incredible MAHA team have made real progress on this front. Here are just a few of the significant MAHA achievements thus far. More than a dozen food manufacturers and trade associations have made commitments to remove artificial and petroleum-based food dyes from their products. The Trump administration took strong action to bar hospitals from performing dangerous, irreversible, life-altering transgender procedures on children. The Trump administration announced funding awards to states through the Rural Health Transformation Program, an unprecedented $50 billion investment established under President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. The Trump administration has also worked with 18 states across the country to ban junk food purchases using SNAP benefits starting this year. And thank you for leading that effort, Secretary Rollins. Additionally, President Trump took historic action to secure most favored nation drug pricing and secured deals with major pharmaceutical companies to massively lower the cost of prescription drugs. And those effects are being implemented as we speak. Americans are going to continue to see the result of these incredible deals the president cut. And I know President Trump and this team behind me worked incredibly hard to lower those drug costs for Americans. On Monday, the CDC adopted common sense updates to America's childhood vaccination schedule based solely on the gold standard of science. This action empowers parents and physicians to make the best individualized decisions to protect our children, while also restoring much-needed confidence in our public health system. And as a MAHA mom myself, I'm very grateful for that. So thank you, Secretary Kennedy. To build on this progress, the Trump administration is now updating federal nutrition standards and guidelines to ensure that Americans have the most accurate, data-driven information supported by science and hard facts, not special interests or partisan ideology. President Trump has tasked two of the great individuals behind me, USDA Secretary Rollins and HHS Secretary Kennedy, with collaborating on this vitally important project. And today they are here to officially unveil the 2025 to 2030 dietary guidelines for America. These new guidelines are informed by the best and most reliable research on health and nutrition, particularly as it relates to the role of our diets and the prevalence of chronic disease in the country. They are also These guidelines are easy to read and understand, so every American, young and old, can access this information that literally has the power to change lives. But these are not just an updated guideline. These are the foundation to all federal food programs in our country. These new guidelines are going to update the food that is served to America's children in our public schools, to the plates that are served to our great men in uniform in our military, our veterans, and the food that they are consuming at the VA. And these new guidelines are also going to impact nutritional programs for the needy in our country, such as WIC and Head Start. Unfortunately, for decades, federal dollars has promoted low-quality, highly processed foods that lead to scores of long-term health issues, which means Americans have gone broke because of these health issues. Faulty dietary guidelines of the past stacked the deck against healthy eating and food options for everyday American families, which has fueled the chronic disease epidemic and jacked up the healthcare costs of households across the country. This failed approach in our public health system ends today. When these guidelines are followed, Americans will be saving themselves thousands of dollars. If we want to cut healthcare costs in our country, we must become a healthier country. According to the CEA, poor diet is the root cause of obesity, which accounts for $400 billion in medical spending each year. A healthier America will lead to a more affordable America. The new dietary guidelines from the Trump administration will ensure federal dollars go to real food to improve public health and therefore save the American people their hard-earned cash over the course of their lives. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Secretary Kennedy. The great people behind me will give remarks, and then we'll get into Q&A for the officials that are here on this specific topic. They will leave because they're all very busy people, and then I will open it up to Q&A with the rest of you on the rest of the news in the world. So thank you, and we'll start with Secretary Kennedy.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Today marks a decisive change in federal nutrition policy, made possible by President Trump's leadership and the work of MAHA moms and public health advocates who demanded reform. Today, in accordance with President Trump's directive, Brooke and I will release the dietary guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in history. These guidelines replace corporate-driven assumptions with common sense goals and gold standard scientific integrity. These new guidelines will revolutionize our nation's food culture and make America healthy again. For decades, Americans have grown sicker while healthcare costs have soared. The reason is clear. The hard truth is that our government has been lying to us to protect corporate profit-taking, telling us that these food-like substances were beneficial to public health. Federal policy promoted and subsidized highly processed foods and refined carbohydrates and turned a blind eye to the disastrous consequences. Today,
stabilization of the country. We don't want it descending into chaos. Part of that stabilization, and the reason why we understand and believe that we have the strongest leverage possible, is our quarantine. As you've seen today, 2 more ships were seized. We are in the midst right now and in fact about to execute on a deal to take all the oil. They have oil that is stuck in Venezuela. They can't move it because of our quarantine and because it's sanctioned. We are going to take between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil. We're going to sell it in the marketplace at market rates, not at the discounts Venezuela was getting. That money will then be handled in such a way that we will control how it is dispersed in a way that benefits the Venezuelan people, not corruption, not the regime. So we have a lot of leverage to move on the stabilization front. The second phase will be a phase that we call recovery, and that is ensuring that American, Western, and other companies have access to the Venezuelan market in a way that's fair. Also, at the same time, begin to create the process of reconciliation nationally within Venezuela so that the opposition forces can be amnestied and released and from prisons or brought back to the country and begin to rebuild civil society. And then the third phase, of course, will be one of transition. Some of this will overlap. I've described this to them in great detail. We'll have more detail in the days to follow. But we feel like we're moving forward here in a very positive way.
How long will this take, Secretary? Some senators who were in that briefing describing your operation variously as that you're winging it, that there's no plan for Venezuela going forward.
Yeah, I know. They're going to say that. I used to be a senator, too. That's what you always say when it's the other party. The bottom line is we've gone into great detail with them about the planning. We've described it to them. In fact, it's not just winging it. It's not just saying or speculating it's going to happen. It's already happening. Like the oil arrangement that we've made with PDVSA on their sanctioned oil that they can't move. Understand, they are not generating any revenue from their oil right now. They can't move it unless we allow it to move because we have sanctions, because we're enforcing those sanctions. This is tremendous leverage. We are exercising it in a positive way. The president described it last night. Secretary will have more to say on it today, who is involved in running this portfolio. And we feel very positive that not only will that generate revenue that will be used to the benefit of the Venezuelan people, and we're ensured that that's what the case is, but it also gives us an amount of leverage and influence and control over how this process moves forward.
Mr. Secretary, on Denmark, sir. Mr. Secretary, on Denmark. Why has the administration not taken Denmark's offer to discuss the situation in Greenland? And
I'll be meeting with them next week.
But will you take military intervention off the table?
I'm not here to talk about Denmark or military intervention. I'll be meeting with them next week. We'll have those conversations with them then. And but I'm not having anything further to add to that today.
Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers this week?
Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term, and he's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how could we acquire Greenland. There's an interest there. But so I just reminded them of the fact that not only did Truman want to do it, but President Trump's been talking about this since his first term.
What? A statement last night saying that the military option...
You've lost a lot of weight. Good job.
They said the military option is on the table. So is the administration really willing to risk the NATO alliance by potentially moving ahead
Guys,
with military operations?
what I think the White House said yesterday is what I will tell you now, and I've always said. The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means. As a diplomat, which is what I am now, and what we work on, we always prefer to settle it in different ways. That included in Venezuela. We tried repeatedly to reach an outcome here that did not involve having to go in and grab an indicted drug trafficker. Those were unsuccessful, unfortunately.
The people of Venezuela are waking up to the same regime. Do you not worry about that?
Well, first of all, the bottom line is that there is a process now in place where we have tremendous control and leverage over what those interim authorities are doing and are able to do. But obviously this will be a process of transition. In the end, it will be up to the Venezuelan people to transform their country. We are prepared under the right conditions, using the leverage that we have, which includes the fact that they cannot move any oil unless we allow them to move it. Well, again, I'm not going to give you a timeline on it. We want it to move as soon as possible. But we didn't expect this would. It's been 3 days since this happened, 4 days since this happened. So I understand that in this cycle and society we now live in, everyone wants instant outcomes. They want it to happen overnight. It's not going to work that way. But we're already seeing progress. With this new deal that's been announced and more deals to follow, you're already seeing how the leverage the United States has over those interim authorities is going to begin to lead to positive outcomes. It doesn't cost us. It doesn't cost us.
The involvement, the U.S. involvement in Venezuela, how much will it cost?
Well, it doesn't going to cost us any money. For example, this oil deal that's happening doesn't cost us any money. On the contrary, and if it opens up,
no money to
well, these look, I don't have the numbers. What operation are you talking about? The entire thing?
Yeah.
Well, these troops are going to be deployed. None of these troops sit in a dry dock waiting for action. They're deployed somewhere in the world. If they're not here, they're somewhere else. Just today, our forces not deployed to the Caribbean seized a boat, a sanctioned boat tied to the IRGC that tried to flee from us. That happened somewhere else. We are constantly involved in action. We have boats in the Mediterranean. We have ships in the Middle East. We have ships in the Indo-Pacific. These ships, if they weren't in the Caribbean, they'd be somewhere else conducting activity. Yeah. That's what the Navy does.
I want to emphasize that. Question from CNN. The question's never asked how much does it cost when they're in the Mediterranean or the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean or the Pacific. But now that they're in our hemisphere, on a counter-cartel mission or ensuring that an indicted individual comes to justice, now you're asking the question of cost. It's a disingenuous question to begin with. You're trying to find any angle possible to undermine the success of one of the most historic military missions the world has ever seen. The level of sophistication that Senate just was briefed on, and the House was briefed on, a classified level, is something only the United States of America can accomplish. The world is taking notice of that. Certainly Venezuela is taking notice of that. And it continues because 2 oil tankers, 2 overnight, were seized by the United States of America, stateless or sanctioned, because the oil blockade, the quarantine of oil out of unsanctioned or stateless, sanctioned or stateless vessels continues. That leverage will continue as Secretary Rubio outlined. So our military is prepared to continue this. As he said, the president, when he speaks, he means it. He's not messing around. We are an administration of action to advance our interests, and that is on full display. We're happy to brief the House.
No. 2 quick things. Okay, number one, because we have to go, because we got to brief the House, and if we don't and they're pissed at us, you guys better defend us. That was because we were talking to you. I'll make one more point, and it's a very interesting point. One of those ships that was seized that had oil in the Caribbean, you know what the interim authorities are asking for in Venezuela? They want that oil that was seized to be part of this deal. They understand that the only way they can move oil and generate revenue and not have economic collapse is if they cooperate and work with the United States, and that's what we see are going to happen. We got to go talk to the House, guys.
Is it a challenge to
Well,
Vladimir Putin? That was a Russian-flagged tanker.
With the seizure of 2 more Venezuela-linked oil tankers by the United States, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt and other cabinet members are currently addressing the press. The U.S. seized a Russian-flagged oil tanker that was being shadowed by a Russian submarine on today after more than 2-week-long pursuit across the Atlantic as a part of a U.S. blockade of Venezuelan oil exports, 2 U.S. officials have told. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth have now addressed the two seized oil tankers. The vessel was previously known as the Bella 1 and tried to evade a U.S. blockade after near Venezuela before heading north across the Atlantic. The tanker was being tracked under suspicion of transporting sanctioned linked oil and was intercepted after changing its name and flag to Russia's in an apparent bid to avoid any capture. This appeared to be the first time in recent memory that the U.S. military has seized a Russian-flagged vessel. The operation took place after the tanker, originally known as the Bella 1, slipped through U.S. submarine blockade of sanctioned oil tankers in the Caribbean and rebuffed U.S. Coast Guard efforts to board it. Russian President Vladimir Putin sends Navy escort as U.S. plans to seize banned Venezuelan oil tanker. The operation involving U.S. Coast Guard and military forces is being carried out near Iceland, with Russian military vessels, including a submarine, reportedly nearby. The tanker Marinera, which was originally called Bella 1, had earlier evaded U.S. efforts to board it. This move could escalate tensions between the U.S. and Russia, marking the first such attempt in recent memory. The U.S. Southern Command confirms the U.S. Coast Guard has apprehended the MT Sophia in international waters. The tanker is now being escorted to the U.S. for final deposition. This marks a significant move in ongoing maritime operations. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joined us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now that we know that, U.S. has seized a Russian-flagged oil tanker, how do you think this will escalate to, or do you think that there is some kind of understanding between Russia and U.S. about this particular oil tanker?
Well, it partly hinges on the facts of the case. It seems that this ship is sailing under a false flag. It's not a Russian ship. It's a Venezuelan ship that changed its flag, painted a Russian flag on the hull, did all kinds of other things, which under customary and contemporary international law is illegal. And countries are allowed to board ships in those circumstances and inspect them. And if they're found to be in violation of the domestic law of the ship that's launched the boarding, they can be taken into, they can be captured, basically. It remains, I guess, in a court of law, one would have to ask, was this ship actually under a false flag, or is it really a Russian ship? The Russians, it needs to be said, are operating a shadow or a ghost fleet in order to avoid sanctions themselves, carrying Russian crude to various parts of the world, but also lending a helping hand, as it were, to fellow travelers like the Venezuelans and the Iranians, who also need their sanctioned oil to be transported around the globe. So it's partly from a legal perspective about the facts of the case, not about the law, but from a geopolitical perspective, obviously the tensions are ratcheted up between the U.S. and Russia. The fact that the Russians have deployed submarines now to escort some of these ships creates the possibility for a relatively straightforward boarding escalating into something that nobody really wants.
Right. And so why would, if it wasn't of Russia, where was this heading, these ships, where was this headed? Do we know about that?
I'm not sure we know exactly which direction they were headed at this point. I haven't seen that. That typically it would be between Russia and Russian markets, or between Venezuela and Venezuelan markets, or between Russia and Venezuela in this case, just moving the ship back and forth. But it remains to be revealed, I think, as to exactly where this ship was headed. And in terms of international law, that's not terribly relevant. The fact of the matter is, flying under a false flag is illegal. And the United States was well within its legal right, despite what Moscow was saying, to board the ship and inspect it.
Right, and thank you for sharing that. And how do you think, how will this jeopardize or how will this affect the Venezuela's government? Just yesterday or day before, the Venezuelan government, just the Rodriguez, she took oath to be the leader of the country. How do you think this will be affecting her government?
Well, I might interpret this as a very clear signal to the Rodriguez government that Venezuela had better do largely what the United States wants it to do, or the United States will double down on its quarantine/blockade of Venezuela, and its sanctions will increase. Right now, President Trump is holding out a carrot and a stick. The carrot is, if you go along with what I want, all of these sanctions sanctions against your oil, and wonderful. And if you don't, well, this is a foretaste of what could happen. The United States will double down on its efforts to prevent the Russian ghost fleet from carrying Venezuelan crude, or Venezuelan ships from carrying crude, and that will have really a negative effect on an already teetering Venezuelan economy.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And Professor, now, if this operation, how do you think this will be reshaping the entire globe's shadow fleet operations?
Well, the Russians are powerfully motivated to keep this moving. They cannot fund their war without selling oil on the international market, and there are only so many land routes, mostly to China, for example. So they have an incentive to do everything under the sun to make sure that shadow fleet, that ghost fleet, continues to operate and continues to transport Russian oil to markets around the world. And there they have a shared interest with the Venezuelans and the Iranians. They all want to circumvent American-led and international sanctions and do what they want to do. I don't think the United States has been doing this kind of interception anyway. This is not unprecedented. But at this particular moment, I think the signals are being beamed mostly in the direction of Caracas in Venezuela and less in the direction of Moscow.
Right. Do you think any other country will be eyeing this situation closely?
I think Iran is very attentive to this because they are also under enormous sanctions from the U.S. and the international community. They're also very dependent on oil. They're also looking for ways to circumvent those sanctions. And any additional brick that is put in that sanctions wall is something that they don't welcome. So not surprisingly, the rhetoric coming out of Tehran is very much, this is a violation of international law, which is both incorrect and ironic given the way that state conducts itself.
Yes. So what legal and geopolitical questions arise from enforcing the sanctions through maritime interdictions in international waters now?
Well, it raises questions about the overall so-called rules-based international order. Is it any longer fit for purpose? It was built in the aftermath of the Second World War by the victors of the Second World War, and it was globalized after the Soviet Union went away. Everybody kind of bought into it, including the People's Republic of China, which joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. But the point is, it was a product of a particular time in world history and a particular set of circumstances. And that was a long time ago, and the circumstances have changed dramatically. Do we need new rules? Given technology, given the changing geopolitical nature of world order, it's no longer unipolar or bipolar, it's now a multipolar world in which there are many great powers, including India and China, and regional great powers like Turkey. Maybe this is a symptom of a deeper malaise that rules-based international order is nearing the end of its life cycle, and some new sets of arrangements, rules, norms, institutions will need to be built, as they were in 1945, as they were after the Napoleonic Wars in a very different context. Every century or so, it seems, there needs to be a rethink of those rules, norms, and institutions. And this kind of signals to me that we may be in the early stages of that transitional moment when the old world order is dying, the new world order has yet to be born, and we're in that interregnum in which strong players will do what they will, and weak players will suffer what they must.
I completely agree with you. Building on that, old world order and now us being in, let's just say, the transitional period. So who will be taking lead in the upcoming or the new world order? What do you think?
Well, my sense is the United States is not going to step off the stage easily. It shouldn't. It's still a very powerful player, militarily, economically, culturally. The Russians are a kind of diminished great power, but the war in Ukraine has demonstrated that they can still have an impact, as does their operation of the shadow fleet. The People's Republic of China, obviously a player on the global stage, from Latin America to South Asia to Europe, it's a big player. And then there are others, contenders, the largest by population country on the planet, India, which is not a permanent member of the Security Council, and therefore does not have a veto. That seems out of line with the distribution of power on the world stage today. So India will be a player. There are powerful regional players. Turkey is one, for example. We can look at Brazil, perhaps, and others. If the European Union ever really got its act together, it might too be a powerful player that could help shape this. And then the question will be, okay, so that's the new distribution of power. It's not just the US and the USSR. It's not just the US. It's now all of these countries coming together. What kind of order will they hash out? What values will be represented and institutionalized? What virtues, what norms, what historical legal traditions, what interests, all of those, how will they get baked into that particular pie in ways that satisfies most of the major and most important players and actually facilitates in a more or less peaceful way the interaction of these big players on the world stage. That's a lot to ask, it's a heavy lift, but the planet has done it before in very different circumstances again, after 2 world wars in 1945, after the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, after the 30 Years' War in Europe in 1648, Treaty of Westphalia. And one could find other examples in China and South Asia as well, where large empires fall, that world order collapses, and a new one emerges in its place with new rules and new norms and new institutions. So it's going to be a bumpy ride, it always is, and the outcome remains to be seen.
Yes, very interesting. We will be eyeing that. Thank you very much, Professor Latham, for sharing that. I would like to also welcome another guest, retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now, looking at what the press conference, and the U.S. seizing Venezuela-linked, allegedly Russian oil tanker or shadow fleet. What message is this seizure sending to other countries, and also what do you think that which country will be eyeing this scenario closely?
Well, good evening, Asoma. Thank you for getting me for your show, and it's turning out to be a very, very hostile and I would say may escalate in future. The country which will be eyeing obviously will be US, Venezuela and Russia, but at the moment I think Russia would be focusing entirely on this particular activity because the escorts, naval escorts have been sent, and under the naval escorts the tanker is sailing across. And this is a very dangerous situation. It may turn out to be extremely volatile if it is not handled with maturity and diplomacy and dialogue. Back to you, Asuma.
Thank you very much, Major General, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we have another development coming. U.S. State of Secretary Marco Rubio, in a recent meeting with the press, has said that he will be meeting with Denmark's government next week to discuss on the issue of Greenland. When asked about the possibility of military intervention in Greenland, Rubio has declined to comment on it and stressed that it all depends on how the talks will proceed next week. Rubio has also noted that President Trump has not been the first U.S. president to talk about the acquisition of Greenland. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Now looking at this, where's the? It seems like yes, U.S. is pursuing their interest in rather hastily. Looking at this, how do you see the situation with Greenland, about Greenland, from U.S.'s perspective?
It's a blatant violation of international rules-based international order, and this is a very poor example of how to violate the accepted or established agreements and settled principles of operations amongst the NATO nations. Greenland is an autonomous country, part of Denmark, and Denmark is part of NATO. US is also a founding father, it's part of NATO. So such a thing happening, it actually adds on to the turbulence in the world order. It gives a very negative signal. Well, USA may have any number of justification to do, citing examples of Chinese and Russian vessels thronging along the coastline of Greenland. But the fact of the matter is that in 21st century, here is a man who is the president of USA, who assured people and gave them, I would say, a very credible justification and also commitment that his effort would be oriented towards stopping the mindless conflict going on in Central Europe and Middle East. Now, instead, he's gone on to attack Iran. Now, the second attack against Iran is being prepared. Now, here is a story of Venezuela, which I think it was neither law enforcement nor any other thing, but only a military attack under a brand of drug cartels. Venezuela does not figure in the UN document. So under these kind of multiple ambiguous kind of facades, they carry on these kind of activities, and they hijack a president or ruling president and take him to their own country. USA is 4,500 kilometers away, and Greenland is much more than that. So under the circumstances, these kind of stances which USA is presenting or projecting are extremely dangerous for the world order. It may actually give a clear indication to other countries in the world. If a situation like this is evolving, well, the dominant power in that region may not hesitate to carry out similar action in the adjoining or the neighborhood or the countries contiguous to its border. A classic example is India and Bangladesh. The way things are unfolding, it may prompt India to use this particular case as a precedent to go in for some activity, some kinetic action, or some action against Bangladesh. So that will not require any kind of justification. And same would be the case with China against Taiwan. Is that accepted by one and all in the world order? I don't think so. Therefore, it is a very, very detrimental kind of a step which is being taken by USA. And like the Prime Minister of Denmark, he articulated by saying that diplomacy and dialogue is a better form of answer. If they want to dominate Greenland,
Yes.
The NATO forces, they have been saying that why not NATO as a whole, they carry out a domination of Greenland together so as to deter forces inimical like Russia and China to
Yes.
its security and safety. So these are my fleeting thoughts coming to my mind. Back to you, Soma.
Thank you very much, Major General, for sharing that insight. I would like to also welcome Dr. Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert, joins us live from Brussels to our discussion. Dr. Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us once again. Now, looking at all the development that has come in from U.S. today, in particular, to the U.S. seizing Venezuela's alleged oil tanker, which was headed maybe to Russia. We don't exactly know where was it headed, but we know that it did have a Russian flag on the front. And also the claims made by U.S. towards Greenland. What's your analysis on this situation?
The situation is the United States is disrupting anything that remained of normal relations between states. And this is, in the case of Russia, they are presenting, by the capture of this tanker, they are presenting an unprecedented provocation, which I can only interpret as a desperate effort to get Russia into a war. It may sound insane, but the provocation after provocation directed against Russia in the last few weeks only points in that direction. That Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, said in the last week, "We're coming for you, Putin." That was not a statement made idly. A week ago, 90 drones, armed drones, were sent against the residence of President Putin, which was documented in materials that were given by to the United States military officers at the embassy in Moscow. These were the routing of one of the downed drones, showed that it had been programmed precisely to strike the residence, and was pretty clear that it had been programmed by the United States. So these are unimaginable provocations against Moscow, trying to get them to do something drastic that would then justify an American strike. Shall we call it a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia? This is where we stand now. As for India, I agree with what your previous panelist has said, but I want to put an additional dimension here. India is one of the founding members of BRICS, and everything the United States is doing, particularly by the last weekend's attack on Caracas and kidnapping of the head of state, that is directed against BRICS, just as the 50% tariffs on Brazil over the imprisonment of Bolsonaro are directed against a founding member of BRICS. BRICS is the leading institution heading the world into a multipolar governance. It is directly attacked by Trump for that very reason. So India is not just a bystander watching these events that are now most acutely directed against Venezuela, and through Venezuela against Venezuela's major customer for oil, China. It is not just watching idly what the provocations directed against Mr. Putin. India is also on the line, insofar as India has invested diplomatic efforts, political efforts to raise BRICS, and BRICS is now under a life or death attack by Mr. Trump.
That's very enlightening. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Doctorow. Please stay with us as we take another breaking development from this news. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has slammed his NATO allies as the rift over his Greenland comments continues taking to his social media platform Truth Social. Trump has claimed that NATO would be nowhere without the USA, and that without his personal intervention, Russia would have captured all of Ukraine by now. The American president has also slammed Norway for his Nobel Peace Prize snub, a prize that Trump campaigned extensively for over the last year. He ended his tirade on Truth Social with yet another bold statement, saying that the only nation that China and Russia fear and respect is the Trump rebuilt USA. This comes just as Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirms that an American delegation is set to meet with Danish representatives next week to discuss the Greenland issue. Now, for this discussion, I would like to welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us rather patiently. Would you like to add something to this latest developments, and also what was said by our other guest, respected other guest, about this being US's message being directed towards the BRICS nation, including India?
Well, let me begin by saying a few words about Greenland.
Thank
The
you.
president seems unaware of the fact that since 1951, the U.S. has had a treaty arrangement with Denmark, and therefore with Greenland, that allows the United States unlimited access militarily to Greenland. It has a large base there. It's had large base there throughout the Cold War and the post-Cold War era. If the United States if Donald Trump rather, is concerned about Greenland leaving North America vulnerable, he doesn't need to annex it. He simply needs to expand the base if he needs to, and he does it because it already does what it's supposed to do. So the bloviating around this on his part is hardly unprecedented, but this time reveals a profound lack of understanding of what America's national security interests are and how they're already being addressed through existing mechanisms. And when it comes to critical minerals in Greenland, well, they're all under about 70 feet of ice. If you want critical minerals, you can go to Canada or, dare I say it, Venezuela. They're a lot more accessible. And of course, annexing Greenland would mean that the American legal and regulatory system would be in place in Greenland, and there would be no mining, because that's the way this country has evolved. You can't mine anything here anymore because of a lobby, an environmental lobby, which is very powerful. So the status quo is the best possible arrangement from an American economic and security perspective. Regarding the broader issue about BRICS, I think my co-panelist is correct. As I said earlier, this rules-based international order, product of a particular time, reflecting political circumstances and interests at the time. That time is long past. It's crumbling as we speak, and the beginnings of a new order are emerging. And one of the possible nascent kind of manifestations of that is the BRICS arrangement, which is internally divided. India and China don't get along around things like de-dollarization and things like that, but it is a different forum representing a different,
Yes.
in what my co-panelists correctly characterized as the now emerged multipolar world.
Thank you for sharing that. And Dr. O, would you like to add something to this, the old world order now transitioning into the new different world order, and also this past operations from US and also on Venezuela, and also this latest US seizing Venezuelan-linked shadow fleets? How do you think this will be reshaping this transitioning of the world order? Where's the international law now?
Well, there is no international law, and we're now seeing that day by day by each of these egregious violations of what we thought was international law by the Trump administration. We are headed into uncharted territory, and what Trump is doing is enormously disruptive. There are a couple of positive things to draw out here, which I'd like to mention. One has been the overconfidence of many critics of the American hegemony, saying that America's rule is over, the time has passed, that BRICS and similar structures are being created to replace it, the dollar is falling, and so NATO is about to collapse. The European Union is about to collapse. There's been a lot of merrymaking and celebrating among those who are cheerleading the new multipolar order, as if it were a fact. Mr. Trump has given us all a cold shower and is reminding us that when the United States has no compunction about violating convention and doing what it thinks is necessary to restore and invigorate its global hegemony, then it wins. It is only if major powers like India, like China, and like Russia, make a common stand and are prepared to have a duel with Washington, that there's a chance of stopping this display of might makes right that we see in front of us. So that is a good thing. The other good thing that may come out of this precipitous attack on Greenland is that it may lead to the breakup of NATO. That would be a very positive development. And looking at the bizarre way that Mr. Trump conducts policy, I don't exclude it as having been one of his driving motives for exploiting the conflict with Denmark.
Right. And Professor Latham, what do you think about that? Do you think that, building on what Dr. Doctorow just said, do you see that if US versus, hypothetically, of course, US versus Russia, China, India, what will happen?
Well, the transition is the tricky bit, if I can put it blithely. When the Concert of Europe was born in the aftermath of the French Revolution, it was after a decade or so of violent, systematic, system-wide warfare in Europe. When the Westphalian system was born in 1648, it was after 30 years of war in Europe, the worst war Europe has ever endured, including the 2 world wars. And speaking of those 2 world wars, they were the birth pangs, as it were, of the rules-based, used to be called liberal international order, but it's been rebranded in recent years, the rules-based international order. So these transitions from one world order in decline to a new nascent world order often is accompanied by systemic warfare, world wars, if you like, at least within the European world as it was understood, and then the 2 world wars were truly global in scope. I have 2 fairly young kids. I'm hoping that that's not what marks this transition. I'm hoping that it will be peaceful. There is no doubt that the United States will not exit center stage willingly, perhaps even peacefully, and certainly not under Donald Trump's leadership without lashing out a few times. But we're looking at deep, deep tectonic structures that are shifting, and no man, despite what that man thinks of himself, no man is actually able to defy the laws of gravity or the laws of geopolitics. It's just that simple. What remains to be seen, I personally don't want to live in a world organized around the norms of the Chinese Communist Party. But I'm hoping that the interaction of declining powers, rising powers, regional powers, soft powers, middle powers, moral powers, all of that together in a peaceful context can result in a redrawing of the rules, norms, and institutions through which we human beings govern this planet. Maybe I'm being more than guardedly optimistic. Maybe I'm just thinking about my kids. But I am optimistic that, especially against the backdrop of nuclear Armageddon, which wasn't the case really in 1945 or 1815 or 1648, that will focus our attention on finding paths forward that are, if not completely smooth, at least not leading to nuclear Armageddon.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. With that, I would like to thank both our guests, Professor Andy Latham and Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.